divers. You ever notice how some comedy sticks with you long after the laugh, like makes you think, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Today, we're going deep on Amy Schumer.
Oh, excellent.
But not just, like, her stand-up, the whole, like, philosophy behind it.
Okay.
We're diving into Amy Schumer and Philosophy, Brainwreck.
I like it.
Which, let me tell you, way more interesting than it might sound at first.
It's amazing to me how, like, you can take something like stand-up comedy and reveal all these, like, deeper societal philosophical currents swirling beneath, you know?
Right. And it's a whole book of essays, each analyzing her work through like a different philosophical lens.
Oh, wow.
So we're talking, yeah, self-deprecation, sure, but also things like psychological egoism, societal expectations for women. We've even got some Nietzsche in the mix.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack. It really speaks to how comedy can be this, like, unexpected entry point to some pretty heavy topics.
Totally. So, okay, let's start with something I think a lot of people associate with Amy Schumer, self-deprecating humor.
Right.
The book actually uses her bit about being the worst dancer as a jumping off point.
Oh, interesting.
So where do we even go from there?
Well, this connects to the philosophical idea of superiority theory in humor,
Okay.
which basically suggests that we laugh when we feel just a tad superior to the target of the joke.
Right.
And with self-deprecation, the comedian kind of becomes the target, which gives the audience a bit of a boost.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. We've all been there.
Exactly.
But the book doesn't just stop at that surface level, does it? It goes deeper into when self-deprecation might actually become, I don't know, a problem.
Exactly. Some of the essays point out how, like, excessive self-deprecation can actually be a defense mechanism.
Oh, interesting.
You know, masking deeper insecurities, maybe even reinforcing negative self-perceptions. It's a fine line. And I think the context of the humor really matters.
Totally. It makes you wonder, right? When is it all in good fun, and when is it maybe a sign of something a little deeper?
Right.
Something to think about, for sure.
Yeah.
But get ready to have your minds blown wide open, folks, because we're moving on to psychological egoism.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. This theory argues that every action we take, even the ones that, like, appear selfless on the surface, is motivated by self-interest at its core.
Really?
Yeah.
Like everything?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So the book uses this fascinating example about Abraham Lincoln. So there's this story where he saves some piglets from drowning.
Oh, okay.
Right. It sounds compassionate.
Yeah.
But when someone praises his compassion, you know what Lincoln supposedly says. He says he only did it for his own peace of mind.
Wow.
That he couldn't have handled the guilt otherwise.
Wow. That's wild. Okay, so like that's a really interesting way to think about it, but also kind of a cynical viewpoint, no.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? Like,
Right.
are we really that self-serving, even when we're doing something nice for someone else?
Right.
The book presents counter-arguments, too, pointing out, like, genuine acts of altruism, challenging this idea that every action has to be rooted in selfishness. It's a philosophical debate that's been going on for centuries.
Right. I mean, because you think about, like, why do we even do anything? It really makes you examine your own motivations, doesn't it? Like, where do you stand on this, dear listener? Do you buy into this whole psychological egoism thing, or do you believe there's something more to it?
It's not just about, you know, poking fun at herself there, right? Like, she's also known for, I think, some pretty sharp social commentary.
Totally.
Especially when it comes to, like, gender dynamics and what's expected of women.
100%. And the book really gets into how she tackles these issues, like using her comedic voice to kind of highlight those often unspoken rules, you know, the ones that are kind of always there, the ones we don't talk about.
Right.
One sketch that really stands out to me, and I think the book mentions this too, is Football Town Nights.
Okay, yeah.
And it's like this satirical but also kind of hard-hitting look at rape culture, all within this like high school football drama.
It's brilliant how she kind of, like, reveals these, like, deeply ingrained, almost unconscious biases that contribute to this culture where violence against women is kind of just normalized.
Yeah. And for those who haven't seen it, basically her team does this whole spoof on Friday Night Lights.
Okay.
But they change that famous motto, you know, clear eyes, full hearts, wait for it, don't rape.
Wow.
Which is just, it's so good.
It is. It's brilliant because it's like, by just making that small change to the original motto,
Yeah.
she forces the audience to actually like confront how prevalent it is that it needs to be explicitly stated as something to avoid.
Yeah. It's like she's saying this should go without saying, but she has to say it. Exactly. And what I think is so interesting is like the way that everyone in the town reacts.
Yes.
It's not just the teenage boys who are like resistant to this whole like no raping message. It's everyone.
Right.
And the book connects that to these ingrained power dynamics at play. Like how even like sometimes women are the ones upholding these structures, even when they're super harmful.
Absolutely. And it really just shows how societal norms and expectations, even when they seem harmless on the surface, can actually perpetuate like real inequality and injustice.
Totally.
And it's not just football town nights. I mean, the book analyzes several of her sketches that kind of go into these power dynamics, right?
Okay.
One that comes to mind is 12 Angry Men Inside Amy Schumer.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so for those who haven't seen it, what is that one?
Okay, so it's this hilarious parody of the classic film, but with this clever, like, feminist twist. So you've got a jury of men, right?
Okay.
But instead of deliberating some big crime, they're arguing about whether or not Amy Schumer is attractive enough to be on television.
Oh, my God.
It's funny, but it's like there's a real seriousness underneath it.
Oh, for sure.
Like, it exposes that reality of the male gaze and how women are constantly being judged and valued based solely on their appearance rather than, you know, their talents or their contributions. And the book ties this back to Simone de Beauvoir's concept of women as the other.
Right.
Always kind of defined in relation to men.
It's like she's taking these things that we just don't talk about
Right.
and she's putting them right there in your face.
Shining a light.
Yeah. Like you can't unsee it. And the book actually doesn't shy away from even like more complicated layers of this, right? Like when you factor in race and intersectionality and all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, there are essays that specifically explore how her work, you know, as a white woman, navigates issues of race and privilege. And like representing diverse experiences, right?
Right.
So it acknowledges the challenges and the critiques, but also examines how her comedy sometimes tries to bridge those divides.
Right. Like it doesn't always work.
Exactly.
But sometimes it does. And it made me think of that essay that discussed all the backlash to her Formation video, where she's like dancing to Beyonce's song with Goldie Hawn.
Right.
Some people saw that as cultural appropriation. Others defended it.
Yeah, it was really divisive.
But it's a good example, I think, of how humor can be both unifying and also potentially offensive.
Right.
Depending on, you know, who's watching, how it lands, their background.
And it speaks to that larger conversation that's happening right now about who has the right to tell which stories, right?
Right.
And it's clear that Schumer's own identity as a white woman and the privileges that come with that are kind of woven throughout those discussions.
Totally. I think that's something that we all have to be really aware of, right?
Absolutely.
Especially, well, I mean, always. But the book doesn't shy away from those conversations, does it?
It really doesn't.
It felt very honest, I felt, in its analysis.
Yeah. It examines how her comedy both reflects and challenges her own position in the world. I mean, one example that comes to mind is that analysis of her joke about, like, Black mothers' names. And the book acknowledges how it reveals those blind spots that can come with privilege, even when your intentions are good.
It's true. It's like we all have those blind spots.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to fall into them. It's a good reminder that even comedians who are trying to, you know, tackle these important social issues, it's not always going to be perfect.
Right.
It's not always going to land the way that they expect it to.
Yeah, sometimes they miss the mark. Sometimes they end up reinforcing the stereotypes instead of, you know, breaking them down.
Right. Exactly.
It's about accountability, isn't it?
Yeah.
Recognizing that humor, while powerful, doesn't, you know, it's not a free pass.
Right. And I think what I appreciated was that the book also highlighted those moments where she uses her platform to amplify those voices that are often marginalized.
Yes.
Or to challenge, like, those systemic inequalities that we were just talking about.
Yeah, like her sketch, Milk, Milk, Lemonade.
Oh, my God.
Which tackles the objectification of women's bodies in such a bizarre, over-the-type way that it forces you to actually see how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, and it's almost like she's saying, this is absurd. Why aren't we talking about this more?
Exactly. And that's the power of humor, right?
Yeah.
Like to really spark those conversations that might otherwise feel too, I don't know, too difficult or too uncomfortable.
Right, it's like a way in.
Exactly.
And speaking of uncomfortable, we have to talk about her movie Trainwreck.
Oh, yes.
I love how the book actually dedicated like a whole chapter to unpacking that.
Trainwreck is fascinating from a philosophical perspective,
Hmm.
especially in how it plays with these gender roles and expectations.
It's almost like a gender-flipped romantic comedy, isn't it?
It really is.
Where she's playing this commitment-phobic woman, but she's embracing those stereotypical bad boy behaviors.
Right.
And then you have the male lead, who is like the sensitive, relationship-oriented one. It challenges those double standards that are still so present.
Absolutely. And the book digs into how this kind of reversal shines a light on the different ways that we view men and women when it comes to relationships and sexuality. One essay even analyzes how the film uses like sports as this backdrop for traditional masculinity and then subverts those expectations.
Oh, yeah. Like the way LeBron James and John Cena are portrayed is amazing.
It's so good.
It's like she's showing that men can be sensitive and vulnerable and even a little gossipy.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious.
And that's okay.
Yeah,
It's like a rejection of those simplistic binary ways of thinking about gender.
totally.
And it's not just about the male characters either. I mean, Schumer's character, even though she starts out embracing those bad girl behaviors, she goes through her own evolution too.
She challenges those expectations herself, doesn't she?
Absolutely.
Like it's almost like a reminder that we're all capable of growth and kind of breaking free from those limiting societal scripts.
Exactly. And it kind of brings us back to this idea of ethical egoism, which we
Yeah.
talked about earlier. And the book, it explores this concept through the lens of her stand-up routines. It examines this tension that we all feel between self-interest and responsibility to others.
It makes me think of her joke about being old school and believing the guy should always pay for sex on the first date.
Oh, classic Schumer.
I know, and it's so funny, but it also makes you think.
It does.
It makes you think about those assumptions we make about sex and relationships.
Exactly. It's classic Schumer, but it's also subtly challenging those traditional power dynamics, right? By flipping the script, she's forcing the audience to question those really ingrained notions about who benefits from sex and how women are often positioned.
Totally. And that actually connects to that whole chapter in the book about how she uses humor to explore like female pleasure. And even like the orgasm, which is still a topic that's kind of taboo.
It is. It's so interesting that it's still considered taboo.
I know.
But she kind of confronts it head on,
She does.
challenging those norms that so often silence women's voices and experiences when it comes to this. And she doesn't shy away from the messy, complicated aspects of it all either.
No, she does not. Like, I love that bit in her stand-up routine where she talks about how she gave herself an orgasm.
It's fantastic.
It's so funny, but it's also like, hello, statement
It is.
about female agency.
Yes.
And like ownership over your own body.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
this rejection of this idea that women's pleasure is something to be given or taken by men.
Right.
Instead, she's claiming that right to experience and express her sexuality on her own terms.
Yeah.
100%. And the book goes like beyond even just the act itself. It also talks about the emotional and psychological complexities of female desire,
Yeah, it gets deep.
which I think is really important. It's a
Yeah.
good reminder, right, for everyone
Yeah.
listening. How do these norms, how do these expectations shape your experiences, your understanding of sexuality?
Right. What are we carrying around?
Exactly. Where does it come from?
Yeah.
Big questions. Big questions. But something that Schumer's work, I think, really encourages us all to consider.
It does.
But before we wrap up this section, I do want to mention that essay on the philosophical underpinnings of her movie Snatched.
Oh, yes. That was a pleasant surprise. That one really goes deep. It does. It goes deep into some like heady philosophical territory. Personal responsibility, moral culpability, even like the nature of reality itself.
Which you wouldn't expect from a movie called Snatched. But there you go.
Right. And I know it sounds heavy, like, whoa, we're getting really deep here. But the essay does a really good job of using like specific scenes from the film.
Oh, okay.
Like there's that one where her character accidentally kills man with a shovel, and they use these very concrete things to like illustrate those ideas in this way that is somehow both humorous, but also like really profound.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. It analyzes how even a comedy can raise these profound questions about our actions and choices.
Right.
And the ripple effects that they have.
It all circles back, doesn't it?
It does.
To how she uses humor to challenge these assumptions. Yes.
That we maybe don't even know we have.
Yeah. It's like she's so good at pointing out life's absurdities.
Yeah.
Which makes sense why she would kind of resonate with these philosophical ideas.
It's like she's got this secret ingredient, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of philosophy in every joke.
It's like hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And it makes you realize, like, anything,
Right.
a quick joke, a scene in a movie, it can all have this, like, deeper meaning if we just know how to look at it.
It's all about perspective, right?
Totally.
Ugh.
So what would you say, after exploring all of this, what was your biggest takeaway from looking at her work through this philosophical lens?
I think for me, it just really reinforces how much comedy can be like a gateway to deeper reflection.
As we've seen, like, her work touches on so much. Ethical egoism, the social construction of gender, those subtle power dynamics at play in our culture, it's all there, kind of hiding beneath the surface.
Right. And to think, like, we got here by talking about, stand-up routines and a movie about a wild vacation.
Exactly.
But what I love is that she manages to, like, weave these thought-provoking elements in without ever sacrificing the humor.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not dry. It's not academic.
Right.
It's just like Amy Schumer being Amy Schumer.
Exactly. She has this incredible knack for finding humor in, like, the unexpected, those uncomfortable truths we often just shy away from.
You're right.
And that's what makes her work so effective, I think. She disarms you with a laugh, and then suddenly, boom, you're seeing the world in a new way.
It's like a punch to the gut, but in a good way.
But you're laughing.
Exactly.
While you're processing it.
Well, for anyone listening who's now like totally fascinated by this whole connection between comedy and philosophy,
Right.
we highly recommend you check out the book Jaimie Schumer and Philosophy, Brainwreck. It's a wild ride, super insightful, and it might just change how you see her work forever.
Absolutely. I mean, who knew philosophy could be so funny?
Right. And on that note, dear listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep laughing, keep thinking, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
See ya.